Gabby's parents want answers!
They deserve answers!
Outside the Laundrie's house became even more of like a circus-like atmosphere. You had a lot of people showing up very upset. People started calling the Laundries the dirty Laundries. They would bring laundry baskets and put them out on the lawn to sort of like, you know, represent the dirty laundries.
Brian is missing, which is shocking, but don't forget, Gabby is still missing too. So while police in Northport, Florida try to figure out what happened to Brian Laundrie, 2,000 miles away in Wyoming, hundreds of law enforcement officers start a massive ground search for Gabby Petito.
We initiated that physical search for Gabby in the Spread Creek dispersion area on September 18th, 2021. This area in Wyoming is extremely rural. You have grizzly bears in the area, you had wolves in the area. This was steep terrain, rocks, boulders, creeks. This was a task that is not for most people. So day one, we searched the entire south side of the Spread Creek dispersion area. There was a pair of underwear recovered. There were cigarette butts. There was a hammock recovered. We didn't know whether they were evidence or not. We thought, is it just some hiker dropped it, or is Gabby out there?
Gabby's parents at this point are desperate. They have not heard from their 22-year-old daughter in weeks. And what they don't know is that the police now have a clue that's going to narrow the search.
Here it is on the left.
And it is a major break in the case.
As we were still searching for Gabby there in Wyoming, law enforcement was also searching for Brian Laundrie.
He was reported missing from the parents, and they said he had gone on a hike at the Carlton Reserve. Law enforcement searched the park, full throttle, with all resources.
The Carlton Reserve, which is about 15 minutes from the Laundrie's house, it's this big wildlife reserve, a swamp, alligators, mosquitoes.
The Carlton Reserve is massive, like the size of Manhattan. It's one thing to go for a walk. It's another thing to try to find a missing person in there. It's like a needle in a haystack.
Law enforcement also knew that he took a gun. There was one gun missing from Chris Laundrie's gun collection, and that was a revolver. So all of this was known.
It's quite strange because Brian allegedly drove to the Carlton Reserve, but his car is not in the parking lot. So what people later find out is his parents go get his car and they drive it home. Like, what? So it's all very, very weird.
Which leads me to the question, what do Mr. and Mrs. Laundrie know about where their son was and where he is now?
At this point, the Laundries have to know something. It's impossible they don't know something.
Social media certainly pays off. There's pros and cons to it, but it was essential in the search for Gabby in Wyoming. One of the key tips that we received and located was from the Bthoons. This is a couple who were internet entrepreneurs and had allegedly been in that area and believed that they had captured video of Gabby and Brian's van.
On August 27th, 2021, we got camera footage going through the Grand Tetons Park.
The Bthoons had a dash cam that was constantly rolling. So they thought, let's go back and look through all of our raw video from the dash cam on this one dirt road, pretty much in the middle of nowhere.
Here it is on the left.
Gabby Petito's van is right there on the side of the road. So they put the video on social media.
And I slowed it down so you can possibly see it a little bit better.
When they were editing the footage, they couldn't believe what they saw. They actually saw the van.
They had done an excellent job of capturing that video. So that compiled with the video of Brian and Gabby that was obtained at the grocery store, we could prove without a doubt that this was them, that were in the area on August 27th of 2021.
The Bthoons video, that really cracked the case open.
We took that tip and we were able to do some overlay of mapping technology to determine exactly where that van was parked. So we scheduled the day 2 search, which was just north of where that van was located. That morning on September 19th, I don't know why, we felt like that was the day that we were going to find Gabby. We focused on the north side of the Spread Creek dispersion area, and we had horseback team of searchers actually walking through the creek because they could get a better viewpoint. They saw what they believed to be a human under a blanket near a makeshift campsite. It was likely to be Gabby. I immediately got in my car and headed to Jackson and found a private room to talk with her stepdad, Jim Schmidt, who was in Jackson, Wyoming at the time, waiting for any possible news that we could provide him. I had pictures of clothing and some personal identifying marks, tattoos from the person that was recovered. And Jim was able to validate that that was Gabby Petito. There was an aspect of dad delivering news to dad that made this a little more difficult than usual.
First and foremost, I would like to extend sincere and heartfelt condolences to Gabby's family. Earlier today, human remains were discovered, consistent with the description of Gabby Petito.
At the end of that day, I went back and I called my own family. I called my 2 boys that were about the same age at that time, and then I went on a long run.
We will never know how Joe Petito processed that news personally. Publicly, he put out a social media post with angel wings that clearly showed that he knew she was with the angels.
I got a message from some news station that said that they had found a body. And I remember I felt pain I'd never felt before. And I don't know, I ended up on the floor somehow. And I was just screaming and yelling and mad. I was so mad. And it took me time to then be grateful because they found her. And my biggest fear was never finding her.
On the day that her body was found, it really stoked my hatred for Brian Laundrie. He left that hand, that ring, that person in the wilderness for animals to eat.
My podcast co-host and I immediately got on the phone because we just couldn't stop crying and we just didn't have any words.
When Gabby's body was found, what was determined from her autopsy was that she was strangled. It's how most men kill women, and it's the ultimate power and control move, and it silences the victim forever.
Nobody will ever know exactly what happened during this trip to Wyoming. The investigation revealed that her laptop was last used on August 27th. It basically timed out around 11:30 p.m.
I think he decided that if she wasn't going to be with him, that she didn't get to exist, and he strangled her to death. She died in pain, and she died afraid.
If this were anything like an accident, the first thing that you would do is call for help and assistance, but that's not what he chose to do.
One of the first things that Brian Laundrie does is call his parents, and his parents immediately retained a lawyer.
He intended to kill her. He intended to control her. He intended to silence her. He was a clear actor in that, and what's more, he tried to cover it up.
On the evening of the 27th, Brian departs the Spread Creek area. Brian's phone begins to ping in another area of the park on a different tower. Gabby's phone did not leave the van. And then Brian's phone was actually turned off for about a 12-hour period.
Brian wandered around trying to create an alibi for himself. He was trying to create evidence that he and Gabby had basically had some kind of argument and that he had gone off hiking on his own. He hiked 27 miles.
Brian traveled towards Coulter Bay. We were able to use cellular data to corroborate that. When he arrives, he actually makes himself known to park rangers and employees that he was engaged to Gabby Petito. From Coulter Bay, he hitchhiked back to the van.
The next time Brian was seen in public, it's by Miranda Baker. And Miranda created a TikTok post about her encounter with Brian once she figured out who Brian was. And that really helped the investigators to piece together Brian's movements after Gabby was killed.
We picked him up at Coulter Bay at 5:30. He approached us asking us for a ride because he needed to go to Jackson, which we were going to Jackson that night. He hopped in the back of my Jeep. He then told us he's been camping for multiple days without his fiance.
The logical reason for Brian to even return to the scene would be to get the van so that he could go home.
Brian hops in Gabby's van and starts driving back to Florida without Gabby, using her phone and his phone to send text messages back and forth to try and solidify this alibi.
In the pretend conversation between himself and Gabby, she became the aggressor. Brian's side of the texting was, you know, I love you, I want you back in my life, I want things to work out. Gabby's side was, you're a jerk, I want you to die. We weren't buying it. We also learned that Gabby's account had a $1,000 transfer from her account into Brian's account, and were able to determine that that transaction occurred when she couldn't have possibly been alive, thus making it a crime for Brian to have transferred that money without her authority. What that did for us is allow us to get warrants and use additional tools and techniques to be able to locate and hopefully apprehend Brian.
The hunt for Brian Laundrie isn't slowing down. Crews went back out to the Carlton Reserve Wednesday, an area 75% underwater. Northport Police and other law enforcement agencies are now using boats, dive teams, and sonar equipment to move this search forward.
Law enforcement searched the Carlton Reserve for weeks, spending literally millions of dollars.
We went up in the helicopter just to get an idea of what the search looked like from the air, because a lot of it was on airboats and horseback, things that we couldn't really see from the roadway.
When you look around from up here in the helicopter, you can tell just how massive it is. Brian Laundrie could be anywhere out here, if he even is out here.
People wanted him to be found so that he would have to pay for what he did.
Brian's own sister, Cassie, went on Good Morning America on October 5th and begged for her brother to come clean.
No, I do not know where Brian is. I'd turn him in. I don't know if my parents are involved. I think if they are, then they should come clean.
after about 5 weeks, law enforcement had to say, it's time we move on. They ended up opening up the park for the public to use again for the first time in weeks. The next day, Chris and Roberta Laundrie were accompanied by a federal agent and a local officer as they walked the Carlton Reserve to look for themselves.
Chris and Roberta know their son, and they know the places that he liked to go out there, and they'd been out there with him before.
It was about, as I recall, around a 45-minute hike into the Carlton Reserve, and there it was, the remnants of Brian Laundrie.
On October 20th, it becomes official when investigators in Florida announced that they have found the remains of Brian Laundrie in the Carlton Reserve.
Earlier today, investigators found what appears to be human remains, along with personal items belonging to Brian Laundrie.
I was really invested in Brian's capture. He represented an opportunity for catharsis and revenge. Finally, we were going to see him brought to trial. But that never happened because he had gotten away with it.
He never had to admit to it. He never had to face Gabby's parents and, look them in the eye after taking their daughter's life. And, I think a lot of people on social media felt that frustration, especially for Gabby's family.